Welcome to Inside Independent Publishing with IBPA. I'm Christopher Locke. I'm the host of the show, but I'm also the IBPA Director of Membership and Member Services. Okay, so one of the most consequential topics among independent publishers is how they can get their books into libraries. IBPA is always looking for ways to set publishers up for success. So we have invited Becky Spratford on the podcast, who's been working with the library market in multiple capacities over 2 decades. Becky shares expert tips about how to collaborate with your local libraries to interest them in your books, how librarians make buying decisions, the best ways to approach a library about carrying your books, and much more. Welcome, Becky.
Hi, thanks for having me, Christopher. I'm really happy to be here. It's a topic I'm passionate about.
Yeah, well, I'm excited because you really have done so much work with libraries. I mean, you've been a library trustee. You're on the executive board of the Illinois Library Association. You train library staff how to match books with readers through RA for All. It's your training blog. I mean, just and more. I can list more. I don't even.
15 years, I ordered books for a pretty good sized library, so I've seen it all.
Yeah, I don't know how you do it all, but that's fine. Maybe you don't sleep or what. But okay. So I want to start with one of the ways that independent publishers and author publishers can get into libraries that you and I have talked about is collaborating with your local libraries on events. So I wanted to ask you, well, what are some of these types of events that publishers can pitch to their local libraries?
That's a great question, and it is a really good way to get involved. Publishers should look for libraries in any area where they've maybe sold a good number of books or where some of their books are already in circulation, and go up to them and see, well, first maybe check on their website, but also go reach out and say, hey, have you ever done a local author fair? Local author fairs are a great way for independent publishers to get their authors in front of libraries. I've actually worked with many libraries on this. I'm helping a library right now do one. And what basically, it's a great place for independent publishers to come because they are going to be able to say, hey, I have authors who live in your area. You have their books in the collection. Can we send them to the library? Can we do some kind of author fair? And what that basically is a day when the library hosts a whole bunch of different local authors. It costs them nothing. They let them all have tables. It's like any kind of small book fair you would see, or even tiny conference. And they can offer their books for sale, but you can also offer yourself up as a publisher sponsor. And that looks really great. And you might not even need to give them money. You might not just give them like a little bit of money to have a food spread, or just provide the authors for free and be there to help them, give them some books to give away and raffle, just showing them that you care and you want to make those connections between your authors and readers. Because when your authors are being read and checked out by the patrons, they're going to want to buy more. And so that's one really good way to do it. Another good way is for authors, especially if you know you have authors with really great historical fiction. My specialty is horror. So, some kind of topic around Halloween. You could call up the libraries and say, hey, we have authors in your area who have specialty in ancient Roman culture. They just wrote a book on it. We'd love to have them come. And if you want, and they can do a program, and we will provide some books as prizes or a book for your collection, something like that. Libraries are always looking for programming and ways to connect authors with readers. And it doesn't have to be a big name author. Library users love to meet any kind of author. So coming in, instead of saying, buy my books, and instead say, hey, I have some books, but I also have some authors that can help you out, is a great way to start.
Great. And then you were mentioning about who to contact at the library. So you said check their website first. And if you don't see something on there, who normally at a library has that type of job?
Yeah, that's hard at each library. So what you want to do is, I like to say, don't let the first time you go to your library be the time you're asking for something, right? So now, if you're a local independent author, it's different. You want to go to your public library, make connections, talk to them, learn who does what. But if you're a publisher, I would start with the largest library in your immediate area. Larger libraries are going to have somebody whose job is programming, somebody whose job is outreach, something like that. But also there's some libraries, if you're talking to the people who are buying the books, sometimes you can't just, it's not, at my library when I worked, it was a team of us, right? Some libraries, there's a collection development department. But I think the best place to get in, if you just walk in the library, the circulation clerk is not going to be able to help you. And quite honestly, they might not even know who to send you to, even at a small library. So if you start with the largest library in your immediate area, and you look at their website, you see how they're divided, look at what programs they're offering, look at what books of yours are in their collection, and then try to figure out on the website who's buying the books and who's doing the programming. It'll be listed programming department. There might also be an email, and you can send an email to questions about this program, email, or go in with a name. And if you don't know, say things like, I'm looking for the person in charge of buying adult fiction, choose an example. You happen to have some of our books. I wanted to ask them how it's working out. Or I want to talk to somebody about who does programming for kids, for adults, for teens. Know that too, that they might have different people in those different areas, and say, I would love to talk to them about providing free authors to come in for free and give a presentation. Telling you that if you're giving them a free presentation from an author whose book has been published, they know that the material is going to be good, and they will buy your book. Like they will buy that book, they'll put it in circulation because they know people will check it out.
Okay, well, that's great advice. I know you mentioned to me as well that if publishers attend a local library association's meetings, can you tell me more about that?
Yes. So every single state has a library association. Okay. So I am on the Illinois Library Association board, as Christopher mentioned, and we have a conference. So whatever state you're in, you should put into a search engine, Illinois Library Association annual conference. Find out when it is. There's quite a few in the fall and then some in the spring. And every state has one. And some areas even have regional ones. So for example, the libraries in New England have state conferences, but they also have the New England Library Association. Pacific Northwest, same thing. So you might have multiple opportunities. Also, hot tip, the Small and Rural Library Association is another great one to look up. It's the Association of Rural and Small Libraries. So it's like ARSL. They have a conference every fall as well. It's usually the end of September. So it's a little too late for this year, but next year you could buy a table and exhibit. This is a wonderful place for small publishers to shine, because unlike the American Library Association conference, where I'm sure many of you are aware, because I know IBPA has a booth, there are thousands of vendors for you to compete with. But for states, the exhibit halls are small, and most state libraries, and I've spoken at many, at their association annual conferences, have no conflict times, large chunks, where they purposely do no programming and encourage people to go to the exhibit hall. And in fact, in some states, I know at least 5 or 6 that do this, they even serve a meal in there so that they know people will come. I am on the board at ILA, and I actually have to go and talk to a group of vendors every single year and find out their feedback. And they really do, from the largest architects who I'm talking to for libraries to these tiny, tiny databases that maybe serve one niche thing. Everybody feels like they're getting FaceTime that they don't get other places. And this is a really great way for you to make inroads with libraries in your state and explain to them what kind of books you have, how they can order them, and then also maybe even bring in an author or two, because this, library workers love to meet authors. And if you have some that are local, bring them in.
Well, what should you bring if you're going to an event like that, if you're a publisher or an author publisher? Like, I'm assuming, you don't just bring like 50 books and try to sell them to them directly. So what do you bring to be like, hey, here's how you can learn more about the book?
So let's go with if you're an author publisher first. You can totally bring books for people to buy. See, here's the thing, though. I want to remind you, when you're going to a library conference, the library workers are not there to necessarily make purchases because they're making them for their libraries, right? And so not always the person with the credit card is there. It's a place to make contacts. So if you're an author publisher, I would say you bring away a couple books to give away, like raffle off in some way, and then provide a lot of information about how to get your books and do a lot of face-to-face time with people. And if you're, like, again, an author publisher, you want to also have some kind of other things you can offer to that library. I can come and help teach writing classes. I can, do a panel discussion of my colleagues who write similar to me. I can do, I do a lot of research on, this area of the country. My books are all set here, and I can give you a historic overview as a program. Remember all those other ways libraries serve people other than the books. But if you're a small press, you want to make sure that you have a display, just like at ALA, a display of the different titles that you offer, a chance to buy books if they'd like. Definitely some giveaways of advanced copies if you can. Little bookmarks with QR codes for them to see your whole catalog, ways for them, to give you their information so that you can follow up about ordering with them. Just you're there to let them know who you are, show them a sampling of what you have, maybe give them a couple freebie things, and then communicate, ask them. They really want that connection. How can I work with this publisher? Just coming to their state conference means a lot to them.
Great. Well, so I wanted to then talk about kind of more nationally, because these are some things you can do locally. So something that I've learned over the years when I've been working with indie publishers and author publishers is, they kind of focus, they go, I want to get a book into a bookstore. I want to get a book into libraries. And they're doing it, they want to sell a lot of books. And also, there's the prestige about being in these markets. But I do think sometimes they're not thinking as much, is this particular book even a good fit for this market? So I think it's good to think about, start there. So I want to talk to you then about that concept. So I know we're generalizing here, but what types of books are librarians looking for? So is it nonfiction, and what type of nonfiction? Is it fiction, and what type of fiction?
Let's pull it back even more. They are looking for books that stand up to multiple checkouts. First and foremost, your book can be the best book. If we have to buy it 10 times because it keeps falling apart after every checkout, we are going to get annoyed. Okay. So please make sure you have solid construction on your books that they can check out, because if we have it, it's great, but that doesn't matter if it doesn't check out. And good covers. Okay. We like to put books on display. We like to put books face out. The better the cover, the better well done it is. Please do not give us AI covers, right? Give us covers that are appealing, that will sell the book appropriately. So if your book is a romance and it's spicy, show me that on the cover. That is not a bad thing in libraries. Spicy romances are very popular. If your book is cozy, show me that on the cover. The covers are important in libraries. We put as many books face out as we can. And we also need books that are in the most popular categories at libraries. So what are those? Romance and mystery, top, right? Thriller. But things that are growing, right? We have horror, science fiction, and fantasy is still popular. Obviously, romantasy is very popular. The key isn't just what the books are. How can we get them into the right reader's hands? So it's your communication about the keys to the books. Make sure your back cover copy or whatever we're getting from you about the book, we can say easily, use that back of that book to hand sell it to someone. For readers who like this, right? Another romantasy standout. A book set far away in space when aliens are now in charge and humans are all dead. Something that gives us that way to make connections to other popular books. Library workers love comp titles. We call them read-alikes. We love them because we can say to our patrons, they trust us, our readers. Like, you really like Paul Tremblay? You liked horror movie, best-selling book? It's out right now. But here's another indie author who wrote this great book that was very similar to Paul Tremblay's horror movie in that it was about a cursed film. You would really like it. We need that help with those keywords. So we want really, obviously, solid, well-written, well-edited, well-constructed books. We need that. But we need to know who else it's similar to. So, bestsellers, yes, but library, I always like to talk about like library bestsellers. Authors like Daniel Silva was a library bestseller before he was a real life bestseller, right? Lots of authors are popular. Colson Whitehead's a great example. Really popular in libraries with all of his first books, but didn't really break out until Underground Railroad, right, with a national audience. We know about the authors our patrons enjoy. You can go onto the website of your local library to see what the top books are. Excuse me. Go walk in, check out displays. What is on display? How are the new books out there? What new books are they showcasing? And get a sense. And then make the books clear that they're obviously unique, but what reader are they most like? And that will help us get them into the right people's hands, because our readers read everything. Obviously, the trends are the trends, right? I mean, romantasy is huge, but you can probably get more books in people's hands with another genre, with another popular author, that because the marketplace isn't as crowded there.
Now, conversely, those are some of the popular ones. And I know you said that, having a book that doesn't fall apart, but are there genres that just consistently, maybe the library is not the best fit for them?
Sure. Great point. Yeah. And I didn't mention nonfiction, so I want to mention that. Nonfiction, popular nonfiction that reads like a story, so important. And independent publishers give us some of the best of those, right? So true crime, biographies, memoirs, narrative nonfiction of any type, really popular. American history, all of that. Things to stay away from. I mean, controversial books sell really well, right? Hateful books sell really well, but part of the things I say is don't publish those. Really technical manuals or nonfiction that's very scholarly, unless your author is like the top scholar, or there's even if it's written for lay people terms, not as popular at libraries, more like surveys. So we are always looking for things that explain hard science, right? In that Neil deGrasse Tyson sort of way. But books that make it palatable to and easy to understand for a general audience, that's great for nonfiction. You don't want anything that's too technical. Unless, again, I said that person's the expert, and then we want that, right? In terms of fiction, each area is different, right? So I talk to some libraries where they have they can't get enough Christian fiction, for example. Other areas where it's not read at all. Again, that's about knowing your market and your audience. I would love it if people stayed away from, obviously racist books, obviously transphobic books. Those things and libraries don't mix. But we love books that represent all voices and all types of people. We want to have our libraries represent the world. Whether or not our states want us to do that is another story, but we want to have collections where every person who comes in can see themselves. So I say with fiction, go broad, but with nonfiction, you're going to make your best inroads, unless you're a technical press, right? Unless you're like, this is what you do, with more general nonfiction. Oh, and nonfiction for kids, so popular. Well done, nonfiction for that elementary age, really need a lot of that now too.
Yeah, it's funny. When I was a kid, I would go to the library and I would always just get a book with the best shark pictures. It's I don't know why I wanted to look at sharks.
Still happens.
Yeah. So on that note, there's this stigma, I think, with, books that are self-published. So I just want to see, is that something librarians, when they see a book and they're it's clearly either an independent publisher, or if they see that it's self-published, are they less likely to carry a self-published book?
Let's talk about that. First things first, I need to make this clear. Some libraries, not many anymore, but it used to be almost all of them, but some libraries cannot buy books if they can't get it from Ingram or Baker and Taylor. They literally can't even go to Amazon. Some of those people can sometimes go to the local bookstore. It is not the majority anymore, but when I started back in 2000, it really was. So this is a big issue. I encourage everyone who can to be available on Ingram, because that in and of itself gets you over any hurdle. And I even talk to self-published authors about this. Get yourself so you can get it, people can order it through Ingram to get in their libraries, because they have those ways for you to do it. That alone would take away any stigma, okay? So that's one issue. The second issue is small presses. No, we are over that with the small presses. In fact, there are some small presses I still ask for their catalogs so I can make sure I haven't missed anything, whether that's an email catalog or a print catalog. And let's use an example from back when I first started, when you could only get urban fiction from like Triple Crown, right? It was a small publisher. I would just buy everything they had out because I couldn't have enough. And I didn't care that they were small press. They gave me what I needed. We did the same thing with some of the smaller Christian fiction presses when I started. So that's important to know that if there's a book that they like from your small press, they are going to find ways to order from you. But the easier you make it, if it's on Ingram, libraries don't care about the publisher that much. If it's in their main mode and they can put it in a cart and, whoever is the selector for that genre and pass it on to their boss to be pushed on, to be ordered, to them, it's all the same. So the Ingram is a big step to that. And they don't pay me. I probably should get them to because I've gotten a lot of people on there, but it is a big deal. Okay. Self-published. Self-published can be harder and it can still have a stigma. There are now, there's forward reviews, there's the Book Life Prize, there's other things that people can do to get the self-published book, have some more recognition and or reviews. That's great. But really, if you are a self-published author and you are looking to start getting into libraries, the best thing you can do is to get into your library first. And what I tell authors is, again, I said this already once, I'm going to say it again, do not make the first time you walk into your library and they see your face be the time you ask them to add your book. You should be a user. You should be somebody who goes there a lot, that participates, that uses the library, that talks to the workers. See if your library has a local author shelf and offer your book. And this can be for anybody too. All of you who are authors with independent presses, offer your book for free for that author shelf, local author shelf. And a lot of libraries have that collection. They don't even catalog those books necessarily, although some do. But here's the thing. Every library also has a request a purchase button on their website. So go on the website, go type it in, request the purchase of that book. Have your family members at their libraries request a purchase of your book. The way libraries work is if a patron of that library asks for a book, as long as there's nothing out there in the literature that says this is a really bad book, don't add it. Nothing is better than that, right? They will add it because someone asked. They will do what they can, okay? Because a patron asked for it. Then what you do is, here's the key though, here's the key to all of this. Getting your book in the library is not the first step, or it's the first step. It's not the last step. Check your book out. Getting your book in the library in many ways is easier than keeping it in the library. If you request your book at your local library, your mom does it at hers, your sister does it at hers, and you live all over different states or different towns, that's great. Your book's in a few libraries. But if it doesn't get checkouts in a year, they're going to weed that book. They're going to look and see how many times did this book check out. And here is a secret. We don't know who checks them out. Privacy. We don't want to know. So when we do it, we're doing our stats. Okay, give me all the fiction books in my collection that didn't circ in the last year. Run a report. Your book won't be on it. Didn't circ in the last 3 years for a smaller library. Your book will not be on that list. Therefore, it will not be weeded out of the collection. So you can check your book out as many times as you want to help those statistics. Second thing, we use those statistics of how many times a book is checked out or how many times books in a specific genre are checked out to see how we add more books. So a lot of libraries may add your book to Overdrive, for example, as an ebook. And then when they see that it's getting checkouts, because let me tell you, ebooks go out faster than the physical books because people will look at, first of all, they read faster and they'll say, like in their search, they'll say, what's available to read right now? And if your book's available to read right now, they will read it. And if you have another book, they'll want it or they'll request it, which Libby makes a lot easier now for people. And then the library will be like, whoa, okay, I got to add this whole series by this author we never heard of. People really like it. And then they look at their statistics a few months later. We should probably get some print copies. This is all tied to the checkout. So getting your books available in Overdrive and getting your books available in a library and getting them checked out, it takes time, but it snowballs and you will get more readers because if they see a lot of people check the book out, even if it was used 6 times, they might put it on display and someone else will find it.
Yeah. And you were mentioning about weeding books out. So
Yeah.
I understand why they'd weed out a print copy because it's literally taking space on a shelf, but they also weed out electronic like ebooks.
Well, we don't weed them out, they disappear.
Oh.
So with the small presses, no, that's the other good thing, right? With the ebooks, with independent publishers and single author publishers, they have a program through Overdrive where you can get your books in there.
Mhm.
And actually the library can buy it and have it forever.
Mhm.
With the large presses, I get a book for 24 months or 26 checkouts, whichever comes first, and they just disappear. So
Mhm.
there are books I have to keep buying by some of those bigger name authors, right? To
Mhm.
keep them in there. And sometimes there's a lapse when it like went away because we didn't even know or we didn't get to it in time.
Mhm.
But people are looking for something to read in the meantime. No, your
Mm.
book will not get weeded if you don't have those restrictions like the big publishers. And that is why new authors find themselves being discovered by library readers, library users on like things like Libby faster because
Mhm.
they're there and they're available. And so they're looking for a thriller and all the big names are out, but your book is sitting there and they try and they're like, this was good. Let's see if there's more. Oh my gosh, there's more. Library users are also 3 times more likely to purchase books than non-library users.
Mhm.
So if they take it out of your library, they're going to get it. And then they might request it in print or they might tell their friends. So yes, no, we do not weed our e-collections because they get weeded for us, unfortunately.
Mm. Well, so you mentioned Ingram Spark. So just so listeners know, IBPA gets benefits for our members for Ingram Spark, such as a free revision each month. And we have like Ingram Connect session where you get it free to talk to someone on their team. You get free or you get discounts on printing. So anyway, some good benefits. But on that note, you mentioned, and I wanted to ask you about this. There's a lot of places where libraries can get books. Overdrive, Baker and Taylor, Brodart, Biblioteca, Amazon, Libby, like all of that, right? That for a publisher, especially someone just starting out, can be quite confusing. So I don't necessarily think we have the time to go through each one, but can you just kind of explain like what is there a difference between them? Like do they all basically do the same thing?
So they all do the same thing. And they all now have services where they give you books under like a topic. So like Brodart, they have a great service for like your standing order authors, right? The top authors, the big name authors. You don't have to think about it. So
Mhm.
we just had that order and it came every time any author in our top 200 had a book, it just showed up. In terms of using them, look at, I would say it's Baker and Taylor and Ingram do the most. Baker and
Mhm.
Taylor and Ingram do the most. And Ingram's the easiest for small presses to get into.
Mhm.
Ingram has the best customer service. This is what I hear from all my friends. It did before, and I hear from all my friends now. They have the best availability. A few libraries I know have trouble using Ingram because they have a lot of customized labels that like Baker and Taylor puts on their books for them.
Mhm.
That's just some of the bigger libraries. What I think is you have to see where are your books getting into now? If you're a press, right?
Mhm.
What libraries have my books? How is it going through? Look at your statistics of where they're coming from. But honestly, most libraries get the majority of their books from either Baker and Taylor or Ingram, and then they have an add-on service as well. So like, Biblioteca, well, and then the ebooks are different, right? Overdrive and Biblioteca, those are like ebooks mostly. Brodart gets added on sometimes, but I really like working with Ingram to start with. I think it's the good place to put your attention. And the small presses I've worked with to get in libraries have had good experience with that.
Mhm. Yeah, and just so everyone knows, you can upload a book to Ingram Spark for free, and that puts you in the Ingram, world.
So great.
And they also will distribute your books to Overdrive. But like you were mentioning, Baker and Taylor, that's something you have to be accepted into, right? Like you don't just automatically, they have to approve you. Do you know anything about their approval process?
I don't from that side, but I will tell you some, behind the scenes library things. There's a lot of, since the pandemic, Baker and Taylor has not done well with
Mm.
libraries. And they did have a big like tech outage for a while that caused some problems. But I know some major libraries who are just done with Baker and Taylor.
Oh, okay.
They are
So,
definitely I don't think it's worth your time, quite honestly. I think
Okay.
that the things are turning to the Ingram. And again, that whole concept that you get uploaded and you're there, I have helped some, like here's a great example, Raw Dog Screaming Press or a small press, and they've been around 20 years. And I helped them like 10 years ago get themselves into Ingram, and they are seeing, they get in libraries all the time now. They even got an honorable mention on an ALA award for horror for a book, because they're now seen as a press that's in libraries, right? Their books are, they've proven their worth, but just by being in there, the library workers aren't checking who the publisher is. Trust me, I can't keep track of which imprint goes with which publisher. You're on Ingram, I'm like, great, I can get it. That's a trusted source. I know the book will come. I know I can get it on the shelf. We're so busy doing everything else. This is just seeing it there is huge for us.
So after the podcast airs, you'll get money from Ingram, but Baker and Taylor not so
I
much.
never have. I've only ever given them my money.
Yeah.
Well, my library's money.
Some people like that. That's how I like doing business. Just give me money. That's how I like doing.
I have to tell you though, being somebody who bought half the books, half the adult fiction and half the teen books for a library for those years, I didn't buy hardly anything for myself because I was spending thousands of dollars. And I was like, all these books are mine.
Yeah, that's good. Well, I want to ask you then about formats, book formats.
Sure.
So, for example, there's this kind of known thing, but maybe it's not true, that libraries prefer hardcover over paperback books. Is that true?
No, that used to be. That was a generation ago. That was definitely true a generation ago. The reason we like hardcovers in general is because the shelves were set up for like one type of book, right? And so we would buy the hardcover, and then when the trade paperback come out, we wouldn't often buy that. So that's also some of where that came from. But when the book comes out in trade paperback, my library, we would buy multiple copies to use them for book discussions, right? But now, no. Now there are so many people who are publishing paperback. Even like take a larger publisher like Amazon's Thomas and Mercer, right? They do a ton of thrillers that are just straight paperbacks, right? Quirk, they're distributed by Penguin Random House. They do a lot of paperback originals as well. They're too popular for us not to have. So we have found ways in the library to put things, well, not us, the vendors like Demco and stuff, to give us things to put behind the books so the paperbacks don't fall through. We don't love the mass market size, but if it's trade, no, we're fine. But that was it. I think when I started, there was still some of that bias, but we're fine with it.
Okay, great. Well, I mean, that saves on, publishers having to create a whole other format of their book. It sounds like ebooks are important to have. It's a popular thing for libraries, so you should have an ebook version. What about audiobooks?
Yes. If you can do an audiobook, they are so popular. Audiobooks have been up every year, and this was before the pandemic. Personally, I am a huge audiobook listener, and I love when there's small presses that have books in audio, because normally I'm stuck with only the major presses for audiobooks. But it can't be the Kindle version, right? Or the Audible, sorry, because we don't have access to Audible. There's a lot of small presses who told me, look, I can't do an audiobook unless I do it through Audible because they make it financially feasible for me. Okay, but I can't have it for the library. I can't, there's no way for me to offer that. So yes, but you can't, it can't be poorly done, right? You've got to invest. And so an ebook, not that huge an investment, right? It's just taking your book and uploading it. You've already done all the formatting. You've already done all the work. You can't just have an AI audiobook. You can't just have the author sit there and read it like this without, you would need to pay somebody to do an audiobook for you.
Yeah.
And I think it's worth it. It would get notice to your book, but I would wait till you had a book that you felt like was a book you could market really well, that maybe already had good sales. It would be a way to get it to libraries you could bundle it, right, on like an overdrive with the ebook and the audiobook. If they can offer both formats, they might try it.
Yeah, IBPA members do have multiple companies that give our members discounts on audiobooks. But like you were saying, if it's done right, it is going to cost, a few thousand. And if it's not, then it's probably not being done properly. Because audiobooks, it's an entire production. It's a lot of work to make sure that they're taking things out that, like if somebody's saying a lot, and they're putting things in that maybe they're fixing something. They're like, you fumbled that word, and they just put it in. I mean, it's a lot of work. It's just like making a movie. So I hope people respect audiobooks enough that they'll try to do them right. But like you were saying, the return on investment can be difficult to reach. So certainly I wouldn't start by doing audiobooks. Like, try to get your print and ebooks to be successful first, and then maybe go in and do whatever your most popular one is, as you said.
I would even go so far to say is if you are building momentum as a press and you're seeing yourself like your ebooks getting into libraries and you put out a bad audiobook, that could actually hurt you more than anything else you could do. Because it will, if our patrons come back and say that was really poorly produced and it wasn't up, we're not going to want to take a bite on your stuff. All of it. Like, it's just going to be, I said we didn't pay attention to the publisher always. We don't, especially but if it's something people really like or really hate, we start paying attention. Right. So you want to be good. So if you have a book that's doing really well, then I would maybe try to go in and do it as an audio. But it's definitely, you could hurt yourself more than help unless you're confident and you do a good job.
Well, that's why with every podcast, I bring my A game, because if that's the only one they heard, they're never going to listen to another one. So that's why it's so much fun. So my understanding, and tell me if this is true, that libraries, either it's necessary or at least very important that there's a trade review of a book before they can carry it or will want to. So you even are a reviewer for Booklist. So tell me about that.
Sure. And I review for Booklist and Library Journal. And I will tell you that still, unfortunately, is a hurdle for some libraries. Remember before I said sometimes you can't even order it if it's not in Booklist or Library Journal. That is, you can't order it if it's not Baker and Taylor or Ingram. Sometimes if there's not a review in Publishers Weekly, Kirkus, Booklist, or Library Journal, then there can't be, they can't order it. However, that is also getting to be less and less. And I can remember back in the days when some of these self-published stars were starting to be so popular, like 50 Shades of Grey, right? We weren't allowed to add that till it got its regular publication in, I think it was like a Penguin Random House. But now, because of that, and I was at a fairly progressive library, because of that, we could start ordering, right? So here's how we do it. We look at reviews a little more broadly now. So we'll go to Goodreads and we'll see what people are saying about it, because libraries had Colleen Hoover when she was self-publishing. There's no way we couldn't have, because she was so popular. And it started with requests for us to get it. And then we started looking at what readers were saying. We looked at blogs. We looked at, any sort of site that talked about those types of books. So there's a lot of resources we use for each genre to see what people are talking about. There will still be some libraries that can't, and that is really also because their budgets are tiny, tiny. And so they can't have books that don't have reviews, and it's a way for them to narrow down what they're going to get. Because we have some libraries that are so small they can only order a couple books a month, and I'm not exaggerating. Okay. And then other libraries that are spending thousands of dollars every month for their books. So yes, that can be true, but if you can get in your specific genre, right? This book, and you can target bloggers and you can get people to post reviews on Goodreads, that will go a long way. And you can point to those when you're saying to libraries, like, hey, I looked at your collection. It looks like these are popular authors at your library, or I was in your library the other day and I saw these displays. We have these books. Here are what our bloggers are saying. Here's what they said on Bookstagram, right? Anyone you can find who has a track record with reading and books, talking about your book in a way that, and it's not even if they loved it. Libraries want to see, again, what audience is that book for? Who is the best reader for this book? Because let me tell you, I know in my head when I'm at the library and I read a review, there are people I picture. I might not ever want to read that book, but there are literal patrons I picture as I'm reading a review. I'm like, they will love that book. And I'm going to just put it on hold for them without them even asking. And if I can order a book and know in advance who wants to read it, that's a win.
You're like, this is such great smut. The people, I know this person, they're going to like this.
Joke. I had a lady who would walk in and say things to me like, what do you got for me today, Becky? The bloodier, the better, and the dirtier, the better. Like, she would just announce that, this old lady. Right. Do not underestimate.
I mean, that's your job at the library. You need to tell them that book. Yeah. So some for trade reviews, it's best to do the reputable ones. So you mentioned a few. So Library Journal, they also have School Library Journal. Ford Reviews, Book List, Kirkus Reviews, Publishers Weekly, anything.
Foreign book for children too.
Yeah. So there are a lot of places that will give you like reviews, but you want to stick with the ones that people have heard of, that are like, and libraries have heard of, that are really reputable.
Do you work with Forward Reviews? Because they do independent reviews.
Yeah, I mentioned them. Yes, Forward.
Oh, did you? Okay.
Yeah, Forward Reviews. And
they're great. We love them at libraries.
Yeah, no, we are a big fan of Forward Reviews because they specifically focus on independently published books. And in terms of getting like the free version of a review, I mean, you have a much better chance. And they're very well known in the industry. In fact, for Victoria Sutherland, who started Forward Reviews, she was just on our board. So
because they do a great job, and their website is fantastic for us library workers to be able to search and sort by types of books, right? By the genres and the audience. They really think about how the books are classified in a way that readers will want to access them, which I also appreciate.
And, sometimes with some of these companies, the whole point is you're getting an honest review. So if they give you a negative review, you can technically tell them, don't syndicate that. We don't want people to know. But I have heard that even if it's like maybe, slightly not the best review, having a Kirkus review or one of these other trade reviews still might even be helpful, because they just literally need a review to be able to order it. So what are your thoughts on not?
I have lots of thoughts on that. So first of all, Booklist only does positive reviews because their argument is, and they pay us if we didn't think the book. If we can't think of a reader for who the book would be for, they still pay us to read it because they don't want to waste librarians' time. But let's take Library Journal. Even a tepid review in Library Journal, or a not so great review, there'll be a verdict statement telling you who it's for. So maybe they'll say for large libraries only, or for libraries with a big following of this author, or libraries where this is popular, right? That's great, because there's lots of libraries with that. I also like to say the reason that somebody doesn't like a book could be the exact reason someone loves it. So take the bloodier the better lady. Like this reviewer says there was too much gore and violence in this story. And she's like, oh no. And I'm like, no, Rita wants to read that book. I'm going to order it because they loved the book except for the excessive gore. Got it. Know who it's for. Yeah. So, yes, exactly. A review is better than not a review. And as long as they didn't trash your book, which they shouldn't, if they're a professional reviewer, I honestly will not turn in a review if I literally cannot think of anyone who would read it. I think it is irresponsible for me to put the review in it. So.
Well, also then on that note, this idea of guidelines. So, we have some people who published books 5 years ago, whatever. Maybe they just never got around to trying to get them into libraries. Like, do libraries only accept brand new books, or will they accept books that are like older books?
Sure. So that's interesting. It depends on the library again. Your best bet with an older book is to go into your local library again and see if they have a local author connection. Your best bet with an older book is to go in and offer to do a program. Like, I'm an author. I have this book. I would love to, it's about the Pacific Northwest and some ghosts that live there. And can I come in and give a talk on that and all the research I did about that? Or do you have a writers group? I would love to be a mentor in the writers group. And if you start doing things for them, you can say, oh, you know what? Somebody, since I'm going to be here, here's a book. Can we put this in the collection so people can check it out when I'm there? They probably will if you've done a program. So that might be a better way if you're an older book. Now, that being said, we have also learned book talk. The old books are popular all the time.
Mhm.
So they might still take it. If your book is less than 5 years old, you have the best chance. If
Mhm.
it's more than 5 years old, you're definitely going to go that route where you find an in with the library.
Mhm.
And then if you start providing programming for them, you're going to be able to say, hey, people want to read my book. Can we add it? And then they'll add it. But as a rule, I would say your best bet is the last 3 years. They'll almost definitely take it.
Mhm.
5 years would be the maximum where I would think you have a good chance of arguing for it to be added.
Mhm.
Again, because especially if you can market it as, hey, this book is 3 years old, but it is great for Rebecca Yarros fans. We'll be like, whatever. If I can say you can read this while you wait for Rebecca Yarros, I will be in heaven.
Mhm.
Thank you.
Okay.
If it's like Eric Larson, nonfiction, great, give it to me. If you can do that, then no matter how old it is, they might still take it.
Okay. Thank you. So you have the RA for All blog, and I did want to ask you about that, where you train, how public librarians can help readers connect with the books they want. So just tell us a little bit about what are types of things that you are training them on?
Sure. So the blog came out of when I taught at the graduate school. I taught the class in the master's degree of library and information science class, Reader's Advisory. So Reader's Advisory is basically the job of matching books with readers. I train library staff with programs. So I do a basic program where I have them analyze their reading and why they like to read the books they like to read, not based on what happens in the books. And I have them sort of figure that out and how to communicate that to each other, to their patrons. And then I go into training about the different genres. What are the trends? I do obviously a lot of work with horror. That's my big specialty. So I'm an expert on that. I just come and talk to libraries about how to better serve their readers by training them to think about why people love the books they love and how to share that. Not just do that transaction, but have conversations in libraries, how to make better displays, how to promote books better. And the side of that is working with authors and publishers to help them get more books by a wider view of people. So diversity in all the ways, both in how authors identify, yes, but in where the books are coming from, what publishers, because too many books are coming from just a few publishers. And we need to have as many options as possible for our readers because they're not checking on the publisher. They're not coming in and being like, what's the latest book from Penguin Random House? They're not. They're like, what's the latest book that reminds me of Gillian Flynn? That's what they're doing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, what I love about that is, it seems like you really support indie publishers and they need it, as much as they can get it. So thank you.
You're welcome.
So you're also an author, you mentioned, and you have a book coming out in September 2025, Why I Love Horror, and You Should Too. So that's exciting. Congratulations.
Thank you.
That's such a far way out. Anything you can tell us about it?
Oh, no, I can definitely tell you about it. So I have written 3 textbooks for librarians on horror and Reader's Advisory, and they're with a small press, Neil Schumann with ALA Editions. So I know all about that. So for the last 10 years or so, I've been hosting a series of essays every October by authors, both very small. In fact, I actually do a thing every year where I take one small press in horror and give them 5 days of authors and then the head of the press to talk about why they love horror. And the idea is that library workers themselves don't love the genre. It's actually one of the genres they're most scared of, and that is not supposed to be a pun. And so I spend a lot of time giving them examples of people who actually write horror and create horror, why they love it, and to share it with my audience. And over the years, I've made lots of connections with people, and it's been one of the things that I hear the most feedback about. Thank you for having these essays. These connections to the authors have been great. And if you go and look at that on my horror blog, I have tons of small press authors, some who started, no names and have become huge. And it's really been fun. So I said, I should do something with this. And I know a lot of the top authors. So I have 18 of the top authors in the generation after Stephen King. So it begins with Brian Keene, and like the biggest names for right now, like Tananarive Due, Stephen Graham Jones, Paul Tremblay, Josh Mallerman, all these authors, Cynthia Pelayo, are going to be in the book writing new essays. Some of them have done essays for me before. One of my favorite, I'm going to have Jennifer McMahon, who's hugely popular and loves when she's included in horror because lots of readers don't think of her that way, even though she is. And they're going to write me essays, 4,000 words or less, on why they love horror. And we're going to curate them all together. But I will provide that intro for each author, like 750 words about how they write, what are the things you can find in their work? What is the best title to start with to read these authors? And who are they similar to? And I'm very committed to having a lot of those independent voices and independent press authors in there as those read-alikes as well. So it'll be a great way to bring the genre to a larger group of people. It's with Saga, which is Simon & Schuster, so it's not a small press, but I will be including a lot of small press voices in there, and I'm really excited.
Awesome. Well, I'm going to have to put you on the spot. What is one of the scariest books that you've ever read?
It's interesting you say what is one of the scariest, because it's not always the scariest books that are my favorite. But I will say the book I talk about all the time that was the scariest is a book that was from early this century, and it's called The Ruins by Scott Smith. It's terrifying because it starts off with just four, and don't see the movie. Movie's terrible. It starts off with four friends on vacation in Cancun, and they go into the woods and go up a hill, and nobody who's ever gone up that hill has come off it alive. But my favorite horror book that I am on the record of saying is behind me over there. It's The Only Good Indians by Stephen Graham Jones. And I am on the record of saying I think it's actually the best book of this century, not just in horror.
Wow. But I have seen the Ruins, the movie.
No, terrible.
I probably shouldn't admit it. Dare I say it's fun?
It was fun, but the book is so much more terrifying.
I'm sure. Yeah, I'm sure. I mean,
because it's so realistic. It's so realistic in every way. And but yet it's completely supernatural. Well, we hope. Just don't leave the beach if you go to Cancun. That's all I'm telling you.
Oh, good. Thank you for that advice. That's probably maybe the most important advice out of this entire podcast.
I think so.
Becky, this is great. I really appreciate you giving all these details, and, you're on the inside of all this, and publishers kind of coming at it from the other angle going, how do I make that work? So you just kind of helping, lifting up the curtain, showing us how some of it works. Really appreciate it. So everyone should check out RA for All website. It's raforall.blogspot.com. Again, it's for training library workers to help leisure readers. And then there's the RA for All horror. That's also your aficionado of horror.
You can get there from regular RA for All. It's real easy.
Yeah, raforallhorror.blogspot.com. And that's a reader's advisory guide to horror. So check that out. Again, we appreciate you, Becky, for being on the show. If anybody wants to learn more about membership to IBPA, I mentioned a few really great benefits that you get. Visit ibpa-online.org. And also, we hope you keep coming back to this podcast. It's every last Thursday of every month. It's on YouTube. It's also everywhere you download podcasts. And you'll get more amazing information just like this one. So I hope you have a great day. Thank you for listening, everyone. And again, Becky, thank you so much for being on.
You're welcome.